What's up guys, it's Dwayne, back again for another video, back again for another reaction, and today's a great, wonderful day. Do you know why? Because it's another Sweden day. 3 things that shocked me about the north of Sweden. I want to visit the north of Sweden, so I'm definitely into watching this. Guys, without further ado, let's get into this reaction. Let's go.
After living in Sweden for over 5 years, I finally have done something that I have always wanted to do and that people were always telling me, I need to visit the north of Sweden. I need to visit the north of Sweden. It's so relaxing, it's so beautiful, and I never really got around to it until recently because I started dating a girl from the north of Sweden, from Piteå, which is pretty far up there. If you look at the map of Sweden, people say that Norrland, or the north of Sweden, actually starts right here, even though it looks like the middle of Sweden. Piteå is way up here, and then even if you're in Piteå, that you can drive a car for hours and hours until you get to actually the very, very top of Sweden, up at the border with Norway up there. It is actually insane how big Sweden is. Here in Stockholm, where I'm located, it's like an 8-hour drive straight north to get to Piteå. So we actually took a flight to get up there because 8 hours in a car, that is a long drive. If you're to drive Sweden from top to bottom, if you start all the way down in Malmo and then drive all the way up to some of those northern towns like Kiruna or whatever, it could take a long time. We're talking like 20 plus hours in a car. So people don't realize how big Sweden is, how much space Sweden has, and most of the people that live in Sweden live in the very southern part, or like Stockholm and down. The population density is much, much more people in the southern areas. Once you get north of Stockholm, it becomes less and less people, more and more forests and nature. So I was very, very curious to see what was my experience going to be like going to Norrland for the first time. And I had basically no expectations. I didn't know really what to expect. But here's how I compare it to, it kind of felt like I was rediscovering Sweden all over again. And let me explain.
So it's basically absolutely different, like completely different from the south.
Explain a little bit what I mean by that, because the first time that I ever came to Sweden, I had been in the US. Right before, I had been in like my home city of Portland, in LA, and these types of places, and then flying to Stockholm from LA, for example. LA, there's traffic everywhere, it's hustle bustle, there's not a lot of like nature in the city center, there's just cars everywhere, concrete jungle type of vibe. Sure, they have hiking trails and stuff in LA, but just from like the sheer standpoint of like how many people and how much was going on, coming to Stockholm for the first time and driving home from Arlanda, I was like, wow, there's so much green, so much nature, so much empty.
Empty space. So Stockholm is a city, but it's a very green city. Interesting. Looking forward to seeing Stockholm.
Space just in and around Stockholm. But then if you're in Stockholm for a while and you fly up to the north of Sweden and you land in there, you're like, wow, this is even more calm and peaceful and even less people. For example, we flew into the airport at Luleå, which is a very, very tiny airport. And when you fly in, it's like landing in the middle of a forest. And you come out from the airport and there's like trees everywhere and there's like barely any people. And it just was kind of this cool, calm feeling. I don't know how to describe it, but I actually really, really liked this feeling. And that's actually the first thing that shocked me about visiting the north of Sweden, was just how like relaxed everything was. Nobody was driving fast. There was plenty of space everywhere. I actually went the 1 week to Piteå where they actually had some traffic because they had the Piteå Summer Games, which is one of the biggest soccer tournaments in Sweden. And there was a lot of people from all over the world that came to Piteå, this little town in the north of Sweden, just for this tournament. So it was sort of crazy also because the north of Sweden is known for being very cold. And they were having like a heat wave when I was there. So we're talking like 25 degrees Celsius. We're talking like 70 plus, 80 plus degrees Fahrenheit.
25 degrees Celsius, that's quite warm. That is pretty warm.
Very, very warm, and a lot of people for this soccer tournament. So it was sort of this like odd feeling of like, okay, I was told that Norrland was like super cold and there was no people, but there was actually kind of a lot of people for the tournament, busiest time of the year, and very, very hot. It was even hotter than Stockholm the week that I was there. So maybe not like the typical Norrland experience. Maybe it broke some of those stereotypes. But anyway, like once all the people from the soccer tournament left and and got away from that, it just felt like very calm and peaceful. Kind of like the US, where you need to have a car to get around. You wouldn't want to live in the north of Sweden, I feel like, because everything's so spread out without having access to a car. So in some ways, it reminded me of.
So it sounds like in England we have a lot of countryside, like the Yorkshire Dales or the Lake District, and that's just very sparse and very quiet, and you need a car to get around. It sounds quite similar. It's European country.
Of the US in that way, whereas living in Stockholm, everything is like walking distance, the public transportation, everything's so tight and more dense that you don't really need a car in Stockholm. So that was something that really shocked me. And just like the friendliness of the people. Like in Stockholm, I feel like Stockholmers can be like really hustle bustle, like into their own lives, doing their own thing. And up in Norrland, everybody was just like calm, peaceful. The neighbors talked to each other. There was this like underlying like small town American sort of feel of like people being more friendly, and maybe that's a summer thing as well. I've noticed that Swedes tend to be a little bit more social when the sun's out, when it's bright. Maybe my experience in the north of Sweden would have been different when it's dark all the time and cold all the time. Maybe you're not necessarily going to be talking with your neighbors as much in that situation, but it struck me like people seem really relaxed, friendly, easygoing, and yeah, that came as a surprise to me. It was like the first time
I'm coming to. What? Let me turn off subtitles. Well, I'm coming to Sweden in summer, so that's going to be interesting. Hopefully, everyone's happy, everyone's talkative, and yeah, hopefully the weather's good and the days. I can't wait to experience a long Swedish day.
Being in this smaller town in Sweden where it's like everybody knew everybody, and it was a good feeling. The second thing that really shocked me is something that I was really excited to see, and it still made this really cool impact on me, and that was the midnight sun. I mean, people always say that it's a really cool experience when you go up to the north of Sweden and you get to like midnight, 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, and you can still basically see the sun, like it's still bright out. Now, Piteå is pretty far up, but it's not in the Arctic Circle. Once you get above the Arctic Circle, on those longest days of the year, the sun never sets. Now, Piteå is basically as far up as you can go before you get into the Arctic Circle. So the sun sets, but the sun sets in the longest days of the year when I was there around like 11:30 or midnight, and then it comes up at like 1 in the morning. So technically the sun goes down and then it comes up like an hour later. But because, you know, after the sun sets, you kind of have this glow for a little while, and like in the morning before the sun comes up, you sort of can see the morning light. It's always like that. So it's always light. Like check this out right here. This is as dark as it gets, which is kind of wild. You never have a moment of just full darkness. And for me, that was so cool to be like walking around at 1 in the morning and being wow, it's fully light. I can see completely everything. It was just sort of a special, cool experience. And I relate that to also like flying to Sweden for the first time. And in Stockholm, it was like shocking to be how long the days were. And in Stockholm, you're always going to have a nighttime, maybe like a shorter nighttime where you sort of have some residual light. But this was just like the next level of like longer days and never having complete darkness. And I really thought that was really cool. And the third thing that shocked me about my first experience in the north of Sweden was the beautiful nature. I think Sweden in general is a very beautiful and nature.
I can believe that. Some of the videos that I've seen of Sweden and how beautiful it looks, I'm just like, wow. I'm definitely going to get out into the nature, maybe go to some national parks if there's no bears or anything, because the Finland video that I watched, they've got bears in their national parks. Let me know if you guys have bears in your national parks, because that might dissuade me from going in and visiting.
Nature-rich country, but there was something that I really loved about all the trees and just all the forests, and you could go out and go for a run and do these types of things. I felt like it was such a relaxing way to be one with nature. And one of the cool things that we did on my trip up there was we went to Storforsen, which basically means Grand Rapids or big rapids, and that's exactly what it was. It was this huge like rapids, I think the biggest rapids in Sweden, and you could walk up next to the rapids. You could actually get to the top behind it, and you could go swimming in some areas. Definitely don't go swimming in like the rapids part. That would be like extremely dangerous.
Very dangerous.
But this was a really, really cool experience to go on like a proper like sort of hike. It was really, really fun, and I didn't expect to enjoy it that much, but that was definitely a highlight of my trip. Also, when it comes to nature, they have the archipelago just outside of Piteå. All along the coast of Sweden, you have all these like sort of little islands and things. And what's interesting is like the Stockholm archipelago, there's more boats, there's more houses, there's more people because there's a higher population density. And here up in Piteå, it just seemed like there was a ton of like uninhabited islands, and it was kind of cool that there was just like less people, that it made it sort of peaceful in a way. Like there was still some boats and still some things, but it was just like the tempo was just so relaxed. I thought that was really interesting. So with that, guys, those were 3 things that shocked me about visiting the north of Sweden for the first time. And I gotta say,
I think I'm gonna have to visit the north of Sweden. I don't know where in the north of Sweden, but I'm gonna try. I mean, I'm saying this, but logistically, am I gonna be able to get there? We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see if my itinerary allows it. And if not this trip next year June, then the trip after, I will definitely get to the north of Sweden.
I liked it a lot more than I was expecting, and I'm excited to be going back and visiting the north of Sweden more times in the future. Let me know.
That was great. I loved that video because I have heard good things about the north of Sweden, and I do want to visit Sweden. It's just, where do I visit first? Obviously, I want to see Stockholm, Gothenburg, and maybe a third place. So maybe somewhere a bit more north. Have you guys got any suggestions? Let me know in the comment section below. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Until the next one, I will see you guys later.